Mount Everest has been called the roof of the world, and for some women, the dream of standing on the summit became stronger than the warnings that could have saved their lives. Some were told they were too inexperienced, too weak, or that climbing without oxygen was suicidal. Sherpas begged them to turn back. Partners pleaded with them to stop, but the summit fever was boiling. They refused, and each step higher only pushed them closer to their brutal end. Here are 4 women who ignored every warning, only to pay the ultimate price. And the deeper we go, the worse it gets. For Shriya Shah, climbing Everest wasn't just a challenge, it was her destiny. Born in Nepal, she had grown up in the shadow of the Himalayas. As a little girl, she looked up at the mountain and swore she would stand on its summit one day. Years later, after moving to Canada and building a successful career, she decided it was finally time. She spent her life savings on an expedition, raised funds, posed for photos in rented mountaineering gear, and told sponsors she was a seasoned adventurer. But in reality, she wasn't. Shriya had no mountaineering experience, no 8,000-meter climbs, not even training in high-altitude survival. What she had was determination, and that determination would later cost her everything. At base camp in 2012, her lack of skill was obvious. She struggled with crampons, stumbled across ice ladders, and lagged far behind the others. Sherpas warned her bluntly, "If you go, you will die, and you will kill us too." But Shriya refused to listen. Turning back was not an option. She had raised money, she had told the world about her dream, and she was determined to prove everyone wrong. On May 18th, 2012, Shriya left Camp 4 with her team of Sherpas. Ahead of her was the final climb through the death zone, a place where oxygen levels are so low that the human body slowly shuts down. Most climbers reach the summit in 10 to 12 hours. But Shriya took 16. By the time she stood at the top of the world, the victory was already hollow. She had spent every ounce of her strength on the ascent, and Everest is merciless. The rule is simple: if you can't descend, you're already dead. On the way down, her legs buckled beneath her. Over and over again, she collapsed into the snow, too weak to even stand on her feet. Her Sherpas tried to drag her up, but at 8,000 meters, no one can carry a full-grown adult down a mountain. One by one, climbers slowly began to pass her, without any chance to actually save her. Her oxygen was gone, her body temperature dropping fast as -40-degree winds tore across the ridge. Her last words to her Sherpa were, "Save me," but no one could. By sunrise, Shriya Shah was already gone. Her body was recovered weeks later from the death zone and was buried in a small town of Nepal. She had been warned multiple times that she was too inexperienced, too unprepared. The Sherpas told her the truth: turn back or die. But she ignored every warning, and Everest made her pay the price. For Maria Strydom, Everest wasn't just another climb, it was proof. As a 34-year-old finance lecturer from Melbourne, Maria was determined to show the world that vegans could achieve anything, even summiting the highest peak on Earth. With her husband, Robert Gropel, she had already conquered mountains across 5 continents. Everest would be the crown jewel. She wasn't a beginner, but Everest demands more than just climbing a few mountains. It demands a lifetime of preparation. In the months before the climb, she trained relentlessly, spoke openly about her mission, and believed her preparation would be enough. In May 2016, Maria and Robert joined a large expedition on the south side of the mountain. Their team was strong, their logistics solid, and their Sherpas experienced. Yet even then, subtle warnings began to appear. The guides started to worry about her acclimatization. Maria hadn't slept at Camp 3, a step many climbers consider crucial. Still, she felt ready. On May 20th, Maria left Camp 4 with her team. Her oxygen mask hissed with every breath, and her headlamp lit the icy path. At first, she moved strongly, but just below the south summit, 8,700 meters above sea level, her pace slowed down. Her legs trembled, her body buckling under the weight of the notorious altitude. Her Sherpas noticed immediately. They urged her to stop. Her husband begged her to turn back, and after a while, Maria herself admitted she couldn't go on. The summit was only meters away, but she made the decision that she would turn back. It should have saved her life, but they didn't know that it was already too late. Her husband asked if he should continue. Maria told him, "Yes, you go on. I'll wait for you here." It was a heartbreaking moment, one partner pushing forward to the top, the other beginning the long descent alone. Robert reached the summit, but the victory meant nothing. As he stood on the highest point on Earth, all he felt was dread. By the time he caught up with Maria again, her condition had worsened. What had seemed like exhaustion was something far deadlier, high-altitude pulmonary edema. Her lungs were filling with fluid. Every breath sounded like drowning. Sherpas tried to help. They told her to move faster, urged her to descend quickly, but she was barely able to walk. Step by step, she slowed to a crawl. Oxygen was running low, time slipping away. And then, somewhere high on Everest slopes, Maria collapsed. Her husband tried desperately to keep her alive, but at 8,000 meters, there was nothing anyone could do. Robert stayed with her as long as he could, torn between love and survival, before the Sherpas urged him to descend. Hours later, a rescue team retrieved her lifeless body and brought her down the mountain. When they finally reached base camp, her body was draped with the Australian flag, a heartbreaking end to her dream of proving the impossible. Maria's funeral was held back home in Melbourne, where family, colleagues, and students gathered to honor her life. For Robert, the grief was unbearable. He had reached the summit of Everest, but at the cost of losing the woman he had loved most. In interviews later, his voice broke as he admitted that the death of his wife was his fault. If you enjoy watching videos like this, then please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. It only takes 5 seconds, and it would help me a lot on my journey. Thank you. Francys Arsentiev wasn't looking for glory. She wanted to write history. In 1998, the 40-year-old American mother set out to become the first American woman in the world to summit Everest without supplemental oxygen. It was an almost impossible goal, one that many climbers warned was suicidal. Her husband, Sergei Arsentiev, was a veteran mountaineer who had already done the climb without oxygen himself. Together, they believed they could achieve what no other woman ever had. From the very beginning, the warnings came. Other climbers told them bluntly, "You cannot survive Everest without oxygen, especially not as a team moving this slow." But Francys was determined. Turning back was no option for her. Step by step, her and Sergei pushed higher, climbing through the night, their progress painfully slow. Other climbers passed them easily, urging them to turn back before it was too late. But Francys refused. She wanted the summit, no matter the cost. On May 22, 1998, Francys and Sergei reached the summit of Everest. Against all odds, she had done it, the first American woman to stand on top of the world without bottled oxygen. But the victory was fleeting. The descent would be the real battle. Without oxygen, every step down was torture. Francys staggered along the ridge, moving slower and slower until she could barely stay on her feet. Her and Sergei became separated in the chaos. He made it back to Camp 4, but Francys never arrived. Panic-stricken, Sergei grabbed oxygen and went back up the mountain to find her. In the meantime, high on the slopes of Everest, another team of climbers spotted something strange, a figure lying in the snow, curled up, frost spreading across its skin. At first, they assumed this climber was dead, another frozen body among many. But then, it moved. It was Francys, still alive. Her lips were blue, her eyes half open, her voice barely a whisper. When they knelt beside her, she begged them, "Don't leave me." The climbers tried desperately to help. They urged her to stand, pleaded with her to move, but she couldn't. She was too far gone. At over 8,000 meters, carrying another climber is impossible. They gave her oxygen, wrapped her in a sleeping bag, and promised to return. But they knew the truth. They knew that Francys would not survive the night. In the meantime, Sergei vanished into the storm. His body was later found lower down the mountain, likely killed in a fall while searching for his wife. For 9 years, her body remained where she collapsed, known to climbers as the Sleeping Beauty of Everest. Arms crossed over her chest, face turned peacefully toward the sky. Then, in May 2007, American mountaineer Ian Woodall returned to the lifeless body of Francys. After a short ritual on the ridge, he moved her from its exposed place on the route, lowering her out of sight so that future climbers would not have to step past her. And while her body still rests on the mountain, hidden in the snow, the story of the next climber would go down in history as one of the most haunting survival stories in Everest's history. For Sunita Hazra, Everest was not just a dream, it was a lifetime of sacrifice. As a 42-year-old assistant health officer from West Bengal, India, she had grown up reading about Himalayan expeditions in the newspaper, imagining herself on the world's highest peak. She trained for years, took loans to afford the climb, and carried the pride of her family and community with her. In May 2016, alongside 3 fellow Bengali climbers, she finally stood at the threshold of her dream. But almost immediately, there were warnings. At Camp 4, their team discovered oxygen cylinders missing. Supplies were dangerously short. Sherpas told them the truth. "It's not enough. Turn back." But the group refused. They had come too far and spent too much to quit. On May 20th, they launched their summit push far later than safety allowed. Again, Sherpas pleaded, "Please back, it is too dangerous." But the climbers pressed on. The team climbed slowly, far behind schedule, losing precious hours in traffic jams along the narrow ridge. Other mountaineers descending shook their heads at the Indians still pushing upward. The hours passed as they were exhausted, low on oxygen, and hopelessly behind. At the balcony, Sherpa Bishnu begged one teammate, Paresh Nath, to turn around. Paresh argued, resisted, then finally gave in. He descended alone. Hours later, he would die in the storm. But Sunita continued upward. She ignored the warnings, ignored the delays, ignored the dwindling oxygen. At nearly 3 p.m., an hour when no one should be summiting, Sunita Hazra stood on top of the world. Her camera failed, the weather was turning, and her oxygen was almost gone when she began her descent. Only a few moments later, her last bottle ran dry. Above 8,700 meters, without oxygen, her body began to shut down. She stumbled in the storm, her face blackening with frostbite, her vision narrowing to darkness. Around her, her teammates disappeared into the snow. A climber of her team named Subhash Pal collapsed and never got back up. Their Sherpas had to abandon the climb and decided to return alone. While her teammates lay scattered across the mountain, Sunita was the only one still moving. Blinded by frostbite, her hands and feet burning with cold, she staggered downward through the night. She fell, crawled, and dragged herself step by step until rescuers luckily found her collapsed near Camp 4. They gave her oxygen and half carried her down to safety. She was delirious, drifting in and out of consciousness, her skin blackening with frostbite. Every step down the mountain was a fight to keep her alive. When they arrived at the camp, her face was disfigured, her fingers ruined, but she survived. Her story made international headlines, the lone woman who walked out of the death zone while her teammates never returned. Her Sherpas had begged her not to go. Again and again they said, "Please back." But she ignored them. And while she now tells her story to the media, her teammates still lie frozen high up on the mountain. If you enjoyed watching this video, then please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. See you.